Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Madam Superintendent. Today I would like to share an accountability update report for you. In your board policy BAB, Henry's plan of action that we so know and love, you make it very clear that accountability is the expectation of the organization, and from this boardroom to every classroom in our district, all adults should be held accountable for student learning. And the understandings that you've articulated in the strategic plan that we are accountable to state metrics, but you go and make it very clear that your expectation is that we go above and beyond to not only have our state metrics, but to be continually improving as an organization, and then locally designing outcomes that you see here listed as the priority outcomes for all students. So really, accountability matters to you, and it's the way that together we're going to be able to see the aspirations of our community actually become what our school district is in the next 5 years. So to that end, in this report today, I want to share an update on accountability to learning in the 2020-2021 school year. And we'll do that by looking at 3 different pieces of accountability. The first being local accountability measures, and we'll look at 3 local accountability assessments. We'll look at our 2020-2021 Milestones assessments. And then we'll conclude today by looking at the strategic plan priority outcomes goal setting of the 6 of 25 goals that you all set at the whole board training that Mrs. Cobb spoke about in the first agenda item today from our strategic plan. So let's start by looking at areas of local accountability. So of course, we've talked a lot about the MAP assessment, and remember that the MAP assessment is our interim assessment that's given 3 times a year, and it is given in order to determine if students are growing in their learning. It provides us with a projected proficiency on the Milestones exams, and it also gives us a Lexile score so that we can monitor student reading in an ongoing way. Now, this chart right here may look familiar to you because I shared this data with you back in May, and it was the data that showed the increase or decrease in the percent of students predicted to perform at or above grade level in 2019 versus 2021. Now, I'm not going to go through each one of the tables with you because we already did that together back in May, but instead I just want to remind you that when we look at this data and why we shared it in May is that we have a lot of room for improvement, and there were a few areas where we did see a regression in performance. But what it definitely showed us is that while other parts of the country are having a much larger impact, a catastrophic impact, on their school districts, we are not seeing the kind of decreases in performance on the MAP assessment that other districts have seen or that people were calling for around the nation. So again, we've all been thanking our teachers, and this is another perfect example of the incredible teachers that we have in our district, but also really the laser focus that you all have had as a board, even in the midst of pandemic, to keep learning as the focus of our work. And we recognized then, and we still recognize now, that while we haven't had a catastrophe on our hands as other districts potentially have, we do know there are students for whom there has been interruption, and that we do have a need to be able to help them to close those gaps. And as Kirk mentioned in his report, we know that we're working diligently every day to support those students now in the classroom with additional support using the systems and tools that the district has provided for teachers in every school. But I really think there's a deeper question we want to be able to look at by giving the MAP assessment, and that's how did we compare in our performance in comparison to other districts as it relates to the growth and achievement of our students. One of the benefits of having a national assessment is that we can get national comparisons on student performance. So I want to spend a little bit of time today looking at the national comparison of our growth and our achievement as compared to other districts around the country. Okay, so every year, MAP gives us what's called a MAP Growth Quadrant Report. And I'm going to try to explain a little bit about how to read this report, and then we'll actually look at our data. So what you'll see is that each dot on this document represents, or on this report, represents one of our schools in elementary and middle school. So you'll remember that we give the map consistently in elementary and middle school, so each one of these represents one of our schools. You'll notice that they're plotted on a X and Y axis. So we've got over here, I'll try not to blind any of my colleagues over here with my laser pointer. On our y-axis, we have growth. So where do we see our students growing in comparison to students around the country? And then on our x-axis, we have achievement. How are our students comparing in terms of average achievement across the country? And then we plot our schools into the different quadrants. You can go next, Judy. So what I want to do is take a minute and just show you what each of the quadrants are to make sure that as we look at it, we know what we're looking at. So in the bottom left hand, you're going to see the orange box. This is the quadrant of low achievement and low growth. So this is where we don't want our schools to be. We don't want our schools to be clustered in the bottom where we're not seeing growth in compared to other schools around the country or achievement. Now the upper left hand is the quadrant that we have in yellow, and it identifies schools where achievement is below the national norm, but where student growth exceeds the national norm. So this is the box, since this is our theme today of pleased not satisfied, this is the box of pleased not satisfied. This indicates that while the students are still not achieving above average, they are growing at a higher rate than average of other schools around the country. So that means that these are schools that are closing the gap, if you will, a term familiar to you from CCRPI, where they have a bigger deficit that they're working from, but they're working at a faster rate to improve. So going in the right direction, but not quite where we want them to be yet. All right, now the upper right-hand quadrant in green provides the schools where the achievement and the growth both exceed the national norm. So this is ultimately where we want all of our schools to be, right? We want to see all of our schools and students in the spot of having high levels of achievement and high levels of growth in comparison to the rest of the country. And then lastly, the final quadrant here shown in purple. These are schools where the achievement exceeds the national norm. So we are performing at higher rates than the other schools and students in the nation, but our growth is below typical. So again, this is another pleased but not satisfied box for our student performance. These are students that are performing well, but they're not reaching their potential. They're not being pushed to the higher level or acceleration that they need to reach their potential growth, which is where we want our students to be. And then you're also going to notice that sometimes on these charts you have the circle dead on the line. And what that means is that's a school that actually is at the average. So if a dot lands exactly on either the X or Y axis, that just means that that school is indicating at an average performance. So now that we're acclimated at the chart, let's take a look at how we've compared nationally for the last 3 years or the last 3 testing cycles in math and then reading. And again, remember, this is elementary school and middle school. Okay, so you can see our 3 charts here on the board, or on the board. Once a teacher, always a teacher. But you can see our 3. If we start in 2017-18, you can see that all of our schools, the vast majority of our schools, were clustered in that bottom left-hand quadrant, the low achievement, low growth. You can see that we had a few that were over here in the high achievement, low growth, but really 35 over here, 1 up here. Now in 2018-19, you can see that our trajectory had started to change. So we went from having 35 schools in the low achievement, low growth to only 24, with the addition of 3 additional schools in the low achievement, high growth, so the people who were really starting to dig out of a hole, and have now 4 schools that were appearing in the high achievement, high growth, that category where we want our students to be. And you'll see we've got 3 schools that were hitting on the average line. Now, when we look at 2021, so again, of course, we had to skip 19-20 because we don't have the data due to COVID. When we flip to last year, what you can see is that we still made progress moving students and therefore schools out of that low achievement, low growth category. So we went from 35 to 24 to 15, which is the right kind of movement that we want to see. You can see that what we also did was have 21 schools in the high achievement, low growth. What that means is our teachers, our students worked so hard last year to be able to maintain a high level of achievement, especially in comparison to the rest of the country. So in other places where people threw in, your laser-like focus on learning is what allowed our students to compare to the rest of the country much better in terms of our high achievement. We stayed achieving even in the face of the pandemic. Now what you'll notice, however, is that up here, remember, we want to have high growth. the impact that our interruption for COVID has had is that it has slowed the pace of our growth. So whereas in the previous year we were starting to see additional schools pop as having high growth, we saw that what happened was we lost some of that momentum. Now, through the insurance that we're putting together of bringing students back up, closing those gaps, addressing them as we see them, and really improving our Tier 1 instructional space, we know we're going to regain that momentum, and we are going to be able to see additional schools back in this above the line of high growth. Okay, so now let's look at reading, Judy. All right, so same thing, we've just plotted the reading instead. So you can see here that it looks somewhat similar. In 17-18, we had the most schools in that low achievement, low growth category, but we definitely had more schools pinging up here with some growth in reading. So our reading overall was a higher performance, more clustered in the center, with 8 schools here, 2 here, and then 9 down in the high achievement, low growth. Now, as you look across the next 3 years, what you can see is that we cut in half the number of schools who were in that lower quadrant from 17-18 to 18-19. And then really with 7 schools on average, while these 2 numbers here don't go up as much as we'd like to see, you can see how all of these schools really elevated up above here, quite a few clustered on the line. And then again, very similar to math in reading, what we see is we lost 1 more school down here, so we went from 9 to 8. We had 2 schools that were right on the average, but we had the bulk of our schools in that high achievement, low growth area. Again, impacted that pace of growth as a result of the COVID interruptions. So that is the local, an interesting new piece of information to share with you, that quadrant report, so that you can see how we compare to other school districts around the country. Now, the other piece of local accountability I'd like to share is a piece around our interventions. Judy, you can go ahead and go to the next one. So back in 2018, as a part of our acquisition of core resources, one of the things that was included in that was a consistent intervention tool for reading that was going to be made available now to every one of our high schools, middle schools, and upper elementary schools, and that's called Read 180. Read 180 is an intervention program that's designed for students who are significantly behind in reading. So students who have gaps in reading that go well beyond just a COVID interruption, but are instead interruptions to their learning that result in them being multiple grades behind their appropriate reading level for the grade that they're in. So even in the midst of a pandemic, we're able to see last year a really bright spot when we look at our high school growth. So you know that what is normal or what is expected in a program like this is to increase 1 year for 1 year as a student. So if you're looking to close a gap, you want 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. What you can see by looking at this chart is that the students who were in Read 180, so we had about 1,700 students who were in our Read 180 class getting this support, we saw in every one of our high schools shown here almost at least a year's growth, and in many cases, most cases, more than a year's growth. So these are kids for whom closing the gap is really critical. We want them to be able to be successful in reading in high school so that they have options available to them when they graduate. I mean, look at Dutchtown. Dutchtown's average growth of the students, remember, these are the students who are the most behind, was 2.1 years in a single year's time. So we're really changing the lives of kids by ensuring that at high school especially, we're closing these gaps. And so anytime you see more than a year's growth or a year's growth, that's really something to be celebrated. And I'll tell you that the company that we work with, our partner in this, HMH, has been extremely complimentary and said they are not seeing this across the country during a pandemic, that we're seeing this kind of growth. So again, the tenacity of our teachers, even in the face of really difficult circumstances last year, helped move our students. And then the last piece of local data I'd like to share with you revolves around our early literacy model. So you'll remember that in 2018, this board acquired a phonics resource for grades K2. And along with that, there was designed the early literacy model, ELM as we call it, which was designed to systematically teach the foundational reading skills in phonics to all of our students. And we started in kindergarten in 2018 at a group of about half of our elementary schools, and each year we've added additional schools and additional grades to that. And I will say I was excited that 2021 was the first year of full implementation K-2 of this early literacy model. Now, when you look at the data, what you'll see is that at each level last year, this is where our students come in. So the diagnostic helps us understand what their prerequisite skills look like. And then you can see that in both first, second, and third grade, by the end, kinder first and second, we saw nice growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. But most outstanding to me, and I think really what I was excited to see when I saw these numbers, were these students who were starting here in second grade with an 83% proficiency on those prerequisite skills. So what that means is that the years of cycles of phonics in the early literacy model is it's making sure our students are ready. So they were coming in at 83%, having the prerequisite skills because of that explicit teaching that was happening in the 2 grades prior. And then, of course, as the standards got more difficult and as the skills got more difficult, those second graders still rose to the occasion and stayed right there at 84% proficiency. So I'm proud of this early literacy model work. And again, even in the middle of a pandemic, we're seeing students learning how to read and having the foundational readiness for reading. And I will say, these kiddos are in the 3rd grade this year. And of course, 3rd grade's the first year they'll take the milestones. And I can't wait to see the impact that these 3 years of foundational readiness have had for our students. So stay tuned for that. That'll be fun to see. All right, now, as we said, local accountability does sit next to state accountability. So next we'll look at our milestones performance from last year. Now, I just want to make sure to keep in mind that the state will not be reporting a College Career Readiness Index score this year, so the CCRPI for the 2nd year in a row. The state is not providing a CCRPI score. However, the state did not exempt school districts from administering the milestones in 2021 as they had in 2020. So we do have milestones data for us to take a look at. All right, but the state, even though they gave the milestones this year, they did specify that students were not required to come on campus solely for the purpose of testing. And so we had a significant impact in the number of students who participated on this milestones exam this year. So you'll also remember that in addition to not requiring students to come on campus to test, they also changed the weight of the end of course test. So of course, traditionally, the end of course test counts 20% of a student's grade in that high school course. They changed that to only counting 0.01%, rendering it essentially having no impact on a student's course average. Now, I am proud that here in Henry, we made the decision that if it was advantageous to the student, that that grade would still count 20% of their grade, because we have students for whom they needed that extra boost so that their grade could be positively impacted. So we're one of the only districts, if not the only district in the state, who actually gave that advantage to our students. But because of that, if a student was pleased with their grade and where it was, we did have students make the choice not to come in and take the assessment. Now, compared to the last spring assessment that we had, of course that was 2019, 10,000 fewer students in grades 3 through 8 and 7,000 fewer students in grades 9 through 12 took the milestones last spring. And while you can see here on the chart the actual percentage by grade or course, on average we had fewer than 50% of Henry County 3rd through 8th graders participate, and approximately only 1/3 of eligible high school students participated in the end of course test, which of course this contrasts with what we just looked at of MAP, where we had an 88% participation rate for our students. So because of this, because participation was so much lower, it is impossible to really find value in a year-to-year comparison or analysis. And so instead, we're going to look at this year's results and our administration that was impacted by so many factors, and really look at it as an analysis of a single year's performance with such low participation. So seen here by subject and grade are the percent of students scoring proficient and distinguished on the end of grade and end of course assessments. And as you saw on the local MAP data, this performance does not indicate the same levels of learning shown when the majority of students take the assessments. But that said, We have and are studying this information so that we can glean from these results what we need to do to remain laser focused on student learning this year and to close any gaps that this data represents for students when they did have interruptions, and really the realities of the unprecedented challenges that we've had in education. The assurances that we made in January that Kirk went over again in the presentation previously are in full motion now. And teachers at every school are working to assess student gaps, know where students are in real time, and work the systems and tools to get them back on track. And last but certainly not least, critical to the way that the organization's going to be held accountable, not only to ensuring learning, but really to push ourselves to the next level through innovation and the rigor that we find in your strategic plan, are the metrics that we're going to use to hold ourselves accountable to those priority student outcomes. So you heard Mrs. Cobb discuss it, but as a board, your desire for many years has really been to ensure that we hold ourselves accountable above and beyond what the state holds us accountable to. And you've made clear that that accountability to continuous improvement in all areas and that locally designed outcomes for goal setting is really necessary. And I think your policies of BAB and IB and then now the strategic plan really show that. So these pictures here are from the last month's whole board training. And as a board, you really went through the arduous task of setting 5-year goals for the first 6 of 25 metrics you determined will measure the success of our strategic initiatives and then in our strategic plan. So through the process to determine consensus, you looked at the outcomes and you set goals. Now, as you set these goals as a board, you kept in mind that if the goals you were setting were achievable, ambitious, and acceptable to meet the expectations of our community, and really that they are set forth to provide valuable insight of what our community wanted and aspired to for our district. So the goals you set are seen here. And when we meet these goals in 5 years with incremental improvement each year towards the goal, we will increase the percent of students showing growth in reading from grade to grade and reading at or above grade level by nearly 15%. That's 6,000 plus more students proficiently reading, therefore really being able to be ready to learn at each grade and ready for college, career, and life when they graduate. We will provide world language learning to 70% of all of our students, and that's going to include 100% of elementary students having that opportunity. We'll improve the percent of 5-year-olds who come ready to school by 10%, and we'll improve access to advanced coursework, deepening a student's educational experience and ensuring the right level of rigor and challenge for every student in Henry County to reach their potential. And then lastly, we will increase the number of students who qualify for the Zell-Miller Scholarship from 5 to 7%, which would be over 200 additional students who will have access to the highest college scholarship from the Georgia Student Finance Commission. So accountability, we know, really matters to this board and will be the vehicle for our students' success when the organization can celebrate the wins together and address the needs we have to improve in very systematic ways. So your board policy IB on organizational accountability just makes that so clear for us, and using a combination of these locally designed and developed accountability metrics sitting next to those that the state provides for us is really essential so that we can inform our community and strive to be that fastest improving and highest achieving district in the metro Atlanta area. So, Madam Superintendent, that completes my report, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Madam Chair, that concludes what we have prepared, but remain available for any discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, and thank you for that, Mrs. Morris. Does any board member have any questions or comments? Dr. Nutt?
It's really just a comment, but I don't see how they could have validated the milestones whatsoever. The more I look at it, the madder I get, because if you don't require everybody to take the test, how can you base your scores on a handful? That just didn't make any sense to me, and it still doesn't. But I do like our strategic plan the next 5 years. It looks better in print than it did the day that we worked on all this. So thank you very much for including that. And again, thank you to our teachers, because they haven't stopped achieving. Don't let this milestones get the best of you, because they did what they were supposed to do. They created a learning environment, whether it was virtual or face-to-face or at home. They created a positive learning environment with, again, no roadmap, no nothing, and they did it. I'm so proud. They didn't give up, and I just want to say they rock. I just appreciate of being a part of this wonderful group of folks. And again, that 30% of Milestones that's just ridiculous.
Thank you, Dr. Nutt. Any other questions or comments? Mr. McDaniel?
I want to echo the sentiments of Dr. Nutt. We did take some time on this strategic plan. We went back and forth on some things. Did this work? Did that not work? Does this make any sense? But I want to say to those that are sitting here in the room that are looking at us that has had a very long day, and I want to talk to those that are even out there looking at us on camera. We are not a board that says, hey, this is what you will do. This is what we want you to achieve. This is what we want you to get, and then we not be involved with you in the work. I love this board because this board has taken the onus and taken the steps to say, hey, we're going to be aggressive, but we're going to be partners with you in being aggressive. So I want to let everyone know here, and I hope I don't take any words from the chair when I say this. We see you for what you do, and we thank you for what you do. But know that we're going to sit here and we're going to partner with you. We're going to listen to your voice. We're going to listen to your feedback, and we're going to do everything possible to give you every single resource that you need to position our scholars to be the leaders of tomorrow. So therefore, as we continuously walk around Henry County, we can look back and say, we did everything that we could. We spent every penny and every dollar the right way. So therefore, our scholars, notice I say scholars are not students, that our scholars are positioned for success. So please don't think as you look at from 51 to 65, from 22 to 70, whoever's over world language, we're going to help you with that one. That's a big jump. But just know that we're going to do everything to give you all the resources that you need. And so I just want to say thank you to my colleagues for what they've done. And I want to say thank you to our staff that's here and those that are watching us on TV. We've come a long way, but there's much work to be done.
Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. Mrs. Edwards?
A comment. When I look at the literacy program that we put in place, it is phenomenal. It's just doing a wonderful job. Kids we see some, even though it's small growth, we have seen some growth, and that's a good thing. And I also want to speak to the priority outcomes and the goals. It looks different. Like they said, it looks so different on this paper than it did when we were over at the academy. But I am proud of what this board has done, and I'm like Ms. McDaniel and Dr. Nutt has said, we have put a lot of work into this. A lot of hours, just a lot of work, and we're proud of what we have done. But I want the parents to know, just like they said, we're making sure that our scholars are getting the best. Here in Henry County, we're setting the tone here in Henry County. Bring your children to this county, and they will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Edwards. Mrs. Pope?
Yes, thank you so much. I want to go back to that quadrant report from MAP. That high achievement percentage is so encouraging to me, and I hope that our teachers are so encouraged by that. That is nothing but a testament to their, the word heroes has been so overused, but that is truly what they are, to have been able to ensure that our students were still achieving at high levels. So I know there have been so many discouraging times over these last 2 years, but this is a testament to the incredible work that they're doing, and I'm so grateful for that. And then, as Mrs. Edwards said, that early literacy model impact is so great to see. I remember when this was first implemented, we were saying, I can't wait to see the impact in a couple of years because it takes time to see growth. And this is exactly what we were hoping for. And I know that COVID aside, it would be even higher, and I cannot wait for those days. So I'm really grateful for you and your team for implementing that and for that continued growth. And then I cannot wait to realize these goals and to go above and beyond anything that we see here on this screen. I believe in the work that we are doing, and it is a direct reflection of the voice of our community. And I think that we have the absolute best team in place to make it happen. So I can't wait.
Thank you, Mrs. Pope. Any other questions or comments? I, too, want to thank you so much for this report, and I just agree with every single one of my colleagues who shared just how proud we are of the work that's going on here despite the pandemic. I really can't believe there's another school system who has every employee so dedicated to our students as we have in Henry County. And I just believe, as we set these goals here, as Mr. McDaniel said, we aren't just putting those numbers on a paper and just leaving it. We do intend to support and approve whatever resources that are needed. And some of those do look, pretty ambitious, but that's only because of how strongly we believe in all of our employees, our teachers, and it's even more than just our teachers. It requires the whole team of people. So I'm just so thankful, and we just believe so strongly in every single one of our employees, which is why we had the confidence to put those numbers on paper. So thank you to my board colleagues for participating in that activity. It really was a good day that day, and thank you for that report. I appreciate it, Mrs. Morse.